Hello and welcome. Hi, I'm Dave, and today we're learning about Node Package Manager, which is also commonly known as NPM. And when you install Node.js from nodejs.org, which I have open right here, you also install NPM. However, NPM also has its own site and documentation at npmjs.com. So let's take a look at that. And you can see the npmjs.com site here. One little quirk I really like about npmjs.com is they give wrong answers for what NPM stands for in the top left. So every time you come back to the site, you'll see something different here. Right now it says New Prog Mixtape. It really stands for Node Package Manager. And NPM provides thousands of packages for us to use in our applications. The difference between a Node Common Core module and an NPM package is that NPM packages are Node modules that are created by third parties, in other words, other developers. So let's search for something here like Axios, which is a Node package. And we see the results. Axios is at the top with an exact match. And you can see they're also ranked by popularity, quality, and maintenance. And you see the little chart over here to the right. So essentially, other developers create reusable modules and share them through NPM. So instead of recreating the wheel, we can search for a module that already exists, and then we can import that module into our applications. Now today I'm going to go over what I consider to be essential NPM knowledge, and we're also going to install some packages that we'll need in the near future when we create an event logger. Now I'm going to start by showing you where the documentation is at npmjs.com. Click on documentation at the top, then it takes us to docs.npmjs.com. Now when we're there, what we're really working with is the CLI. And that's what developers typically use when they're integrating NPM into their projects. And there's CLI commands, configuring NPM and using NPM. There's quite a few commands. I'll just go over what I consider to be essential, what I use the most, and what you really need to get started. But I always want you to know where to find that documentation, and reading the docs is definitely a big part of being a developer. Okay, let's move over to Visual Studio Code. I've got Visual Studio Code open, and I have a new folder for the tutorial and then an index.js file that is completely empty right now. We're going to start off by just putting a console log statement and saying testing inside of our index.js, and we can save that file. Now I want to open a terminal, so we can go to the terminal menu, or since I'm in Windows, I'm just going to press Control and the backtick, and it will open up a terminal. Now in the terminal, we can install a Node package globally that we can just call from the command line without adding it to a specific project. So I'd like to do that first. I'll type npm, and then the word install works, but you can also use the alias I, or there's also an alias add. I typically use just I. From there, I want to install nodemon. And this is a great development package, but it's also good to install globally because you might just want to call it from the command line. And with nodemon, we want to put -g. Now, what nodemon does is it monitors your files, and as you save, it automatically restarts the server. So we're not always typing node and the file name in the terminal. It just kind of does it for us. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter to install this package globally, and then when it finishes, we'll see how it works with our index.js. Okay, and the package installed, we're ready to try out nodemon. So let's type nodemon instead of node, and it's going to look for the index.js by default, so I don't really need to type that name. But if I had a different file name like server, I would type server or something like that. Right now I'm just going to type nodemon, and it will know to look for the index.js. And it says it is watching the extensions JS, MJS, and JSON, and it started our index.js. And here we can see the message testing. So it did go ahead and log to the console testing. Now I'm going to change the file, add an exclamation mark, and save. And then you can see it was restarting due to changes, and then it went ahead and ran the file and we got testing in the console. So that's how NodeMon works. Now to exit NodeMon, you can press Control-C, just like we would to exit a Node application that we were running if we tested it by typing node index. And now that you know how to install a package globally, let's go ahead and add a package to our project. But before we do that, we have to initialize NPM for our project. I'll type NPM, and then just like when we initialize Git, if you're familiar with working with Git, we type init. Now it will ask some questions at the beginning. If I want to skip those questions, I'll just put in the flag -yes to answer yes to all the defaults. But I'll go ahead and not do that just to show you the questions it will ask. And then I'll just press enter on each one to go ahead and accept the defaults. But first it's going to initialize NPM. Okay, it's asking me the package name, and the default would be 03tut, what I named the folder. And then the version by default is 1.0.0. Description, you don't have to enter one. Entry point by default is index.js, but we could change that to server.js or something else if we wanted to. Test command, nothing to enter there. We don't have a Git repository yet, no keywords. You could put your name for author if you want to. And there's the license by default. And then it says, is all of this okay? And the default is yes, so I'll just press enter one more time. Now if we look over in the file tree, we see a package.json file. And this pretty much has all the information that we answered those questions to. Now the package.json file is important because this is what NPM reads to know what packages to install for your project. And that is because this file will stay with your repository if we send it to GitHub, but we won't send the packages itself. And that way we don't have to transfer as much data or store as much data. And then when somebody else clones or installs this application, it can just read the package.json. Or likewise, if we were to host it and build the application at a host and run a build command, then it would install those packages there without having to transfer them over from GitHub. So now that we have this, let's go ahead and add a package to our program. And I'm going to say npm I, and then I'll type date-fns, which stands for date functions, and press enter, and it will install this package as a dependency, which we will see in our package.json file. Okay, that completed installing, and we now see dependencies listed in our package.json file. And these are production dependencies we see listed here. So when the project would build with a build command, it would include this package because we would know it would be part of the overall application that needed to go into production. But we can also have dev dependencies. Before we get to the dev dependencies though, let's go ahead and look at the file tree, because now we have a package-lock.json, and we don't want to change anything in there. That's just handled by NPM, but you will see it show up in its file tree. We just work with package.json. We also see a node modules folder, and this can get fairly large fairly fast because there will be a lot of files and folders in here. And that's because any dependency that we add can also pull in other dependencies. And if this package needs all of these dependencies, this gets very large. And that's why we don't want to store that in GitHub. So what we should do is always add a .git ignore file. Oh, and I didn't press dot, I got a slash. There we go, .git ignore. And in this git ignore file, the first thing you should add should be node_modules. Now I'll go ahead and press save. And now if we were to initialize Git and save this to GitHub, the node modules folder would not be included. And that's important because there is a lot of data in node modules. Now I'm not going to delete the node modules folder right now, but if you were to clone another repository and it had the package.json but did not have the node modules, you would get an error if you tried to run or tried to start the project. So what you want to do is type npm install, And if you just type npm install and press enter, it's going to read the package.json file and go ahead and install the node modules you need. And that's important, of course, when you're pulling down another repo, say from GitHub, maybe you cloned it, and then you want to install the node modules that are used in that application. Okay, with the date FNS dependency, let's go ahead and use it now in our index.js. I'll get rid of this console log statement that we have here. And at the top, we want to go ahead and import, and we're going to destructure because we'll just import format. And this is using common.js again, so we use require, and then we'll say date-fns. And now that we have that imported, we can use it in a statement. So I'll just put another console log here. And I'm going to paste in the format, but then we can go over it. So we're calling the format function from date.fns, and it accepts a new date. And after it accepts a new date, we have to tell it how we want it to format it. And of course, you have to read the docs to know how to format it. And I am pulling in the year, the month, and I didn't mean to do that. Let's undo that. The month and the days. And then I'm putting a tab in, and then I'm putting in the hours, minutes, and seconds. And so this will be tab delimited. So we'll have two columns. We'll have the date and the time. And we could use this in a log format, and that will be the end goal eventually as we learn about events. But right now, let's just format this date and go ahead and send it to the console. Now remember, we're not running NodeMon again yet, so let's go ahead and add NodeMon as a dev package to our project. Okay, back in package.json, we're going to add a dev dependency. Now easily, I could run NodeMon right here from the terminal as a global dependency because we'd already installed it, but I just want to use this as an example of installing a dev dependency. So here we type npm I once again, and I'll type NodeMon, but then I want to give the flag. You could do -- save -dev, but there is just a shorthand for that, and it's dash with a capital D. And this will save NodeMon as a dev dependency. So I'll go ahead and press enter and let that install. All right, now with NodeMon installed as a dev dependency, you can now see that in the package.json as well, and it lists a dev dependency. So let's talk about scripts and how to run our application using scripts, because that's what a server would use if we were to host this somewhere. And you often see a start script, a dev script, and a build script. If you're familiar with React or something similar, you have definitely seen some of those before. So let's go ahead and add a start script. And now in the start script, we need to just go ahead and call node, not NodeMon, but node, and we can say index right here because that is what we want to run our project with. But then let's go ahead, and we don't need a test script, so let's change this to dev. And I'll go ahead and replace the test script now with NodeMon. And we'll go ahead and we can specify index here as well. But remember, it defaults to index.js anyway. So let's go ahead and save that. Now, if we're to start the project, start is one of the few words that works without the word run. So we could just type npm start and start our project. But we don't need to do that yet. We want to use dev. So let's say npm run dev and press enter. And you can see NodeMon started, and we've got the date over here with the format I gave it, which is year, month, and day. And then there's a tab spacing, and then we have the time, and you can see we're using military time, which would be 0 through 23 hours, and then minutes and seconds. Now back in the index, if we were to make any other changes, NodeMon will continue to watch this and go ahead and restart the server. So then if I just put another console log and said, hello, save the file, NodeMon restarts, and we should get the new information in the console as well. And that's what we get with the hello. Now I want to go ahead and stop this again because we want to add another dependency to our project. While you don't have to look at the package.json while you install dependencies, I'm going to go ahead and do that so we can see the new dependency added. And here I'm going to type npm I for install once again, and this is a production dependency. So we don't need to put a flag after it. It'll go directly to the dependencies. And we're going to install UUID, which allows us to generate IDs that, of course, are different for each entry. So I'll go ahead and press enter. And now we can see UUID installed here as a dependency in our package.json also. So let's go back to index and use this package as well. So we need to import it at the top, and here we'll say const. And now this is a little different. Now with ES6 imports, we would say import UUID as and give the name that we want to give it. Now here we need to import a version, which is a specific version. It's v4, but we want to import that as UUID. And then we can say equals require and then specify UUID here. Now you may see this done in different ways as well. So instead of the v4 this way, some could just use it as v4, or you might see an import and just here have UUID. And let me get rid of that curly brace there. And then in the code, they could possibly use it as UUID.v4 and call it that way as well. What we're going to do is use it as UUID. So back here, we want to make sure it is v4. So I'm going to say import v4 as UUID. And now we can use this, and this will log a different ID or generate a different ID to the console. And then of course our console log statement is what will log that. So let's go ahead and save this. And now once again in the terminal, I'm going to type npm run dev to start NodeMon. NodeMon started up, and you can see we've got the format of the date with the date and time. And then on the next line, the second console statement, we got the result of calling UUID. And if we just make any change basically to the console, it's going to generate another UUID that's different than the one we got before, of course. So you can see how it generates a different ID each time, and that can be very useful, including with something we would log, such as an event, whether it's an error or a request or anything like that that we might write to a log file. We might want to give each entry its own ID. I want to jump back to Chrome really quickly just to draw your attention to how we can search for these packages, because you might be wondering, how do I know about these packages? Well, you could search for ID and see what would come up. And remember, they're also ranked by popularity, and we got nano ID, short ID, but we don't see UUID. But somewhere I learned about it along the way, and if you do search for UUID, it will show up. Here it is, the exact match. Popularity is huge, quality is good. And so then when you go to the page, you can read about the details for the package you want to use. So here's some good information about it. It tells you how to install it, and of course it quickly tells you how to install it here. It shows you where the GitHub repository is. Weekly downloads, that's a very popular package right there. So this is a good example. Of course, there's some docs as well, and you can look that up, and of course you can search again at the top. I'll look for date-fns. Many times a package will have its own website as well that has documentation, and date-fns is definitely one of those that do. Of course, notice it changed nomadic people migration at the top for NPM. I always like the different definitions it gives NPM. Again, Node Package Manager. This says it's like Lodash for dates. Lodash is another package you could use. But this date-fns has its own GitHub repository. It also has its own web page that I believe is linked here somewhere. If I scroll down, maybe we'll see that. Oh, here it is. See datefns.org for the docs. So there's all kinds of information about each package as you explore that. I just wanted to highlight that again as we work with these. And now let's take another look at the package.json, because there is a little more detail we need to look at. Look at the packages we have installed here under dependencies, or also under dev dependencies, and you can see we get the semantic versioning numbers. Now let's talk about these, because this first number means a major version, the second number means a minor version, and the third number means a patch. Now the caret we see in front means go ahead and allow an update to the minor version and the patch if needed, but do not update a major version. A major version could have breaking changes to your application, so you don't necessarily want to allow those. You can. Now, if you don't put anything in front of the number, this is saying specifically this version and only this version for this project will work. So once again, if you put the caret, that is saying go ahead and update minor versions or patches, but not a major version. So now if we have what's called a tilde, the little squiggly kind of, let me put it there, this is saying go ahead and update a patch version, but do not update a minor version. So if you see the tilde, that will allow patches only and not minor versions or major versions. Now, if we got rid of this altogether, let me go ahead and put the caret back because I'm going to want to replace that. And you just saw an asterisk in here. This would mean go ahead and update everything all the time. Use the absolute latest version every time. That is not too safe, although you might see it. This is what you'll typically see, and what is installed by default to your package.json is to have the caret here. And it's worth noting that when you install, if you specifically want to install a different version or any kind of version, you can just have npm install and then say we would type uuid and then put the @ symbol. And after that, say the specific version you want. If you wanted 8.3.1, then this would install that specific version. However, if you just say uuid, you're going to probably get the latest version when you install here, but then it's going to mark it to not update any major changes because those could, once again, cause a break in your application. So that could be what would be considered a breaking change. I'm going to go ahead and save the package.json now, and if there were updates, or if you wanted to check for updates to say, okay, is uuid, does it have a new minor version or something like that? If we had it like this, remember it would not install the major version, but if there was a minor version or a patch, you could just type npm update and NPM will check for any updates for your packages. And you can see I had no updates, or it would say something about that as well. So there were no updates there. So the only thing that I typically use or might need to use that I haven't shown you on a regular basis would be uninstall. So here we can type npm, and then you could use the full uninstall, or you can just use un, or you can use rm for remove. So let's just go ahead and use rm. And then we're going to uninstall nodemon. But nodemon is a dev dependency, so you always need to add that specific flag if it's a dev dependency. Or if we wanted to install the global version, I would put the -g as well. Now, if it was production, you wouldn't have a flag at all. So let's go ahead and uninstall the dev dependency nodemon. Now this is worth noting. We did uninstall it, so there is no longer a dev dependency listed. It went ahead and kept the dev dependencies in here, but it's just an empty object right now. However, we still have nodemon listed in our script. It's not going to automatically change a script for you. So that could be an issue. If you want to install something that you have in a script, you need to remember to go and check for that as well. Now, nodemon is something I would probably have installed as a dev dependency, so we could just re-add that. But again, worth noting, if you uninstall a package, it doesn't remove it from your scripts, so you need to check that as well. Hey, thank you so much for giving this video a like if it helped you get started with Node.js. Also, thank you for watching and subscribing because you're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.